introduce myself. My name is Drew Blankenship. I'm an attorney with the Arkansas Ethics Commission. We're the agency that has oversight of campaign finance reports and some campaign finance or campaign conduct. And so we oversee the registration and reporting laws that you all have to adhere to as county political party committees. And so I'll be talking to you today about that. If you have questions as I go along, feel free to send them to me in the chat, and I can kind of answer as I go along, but I'm happy to answer questions after the presentation as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the screen with the presentation.
Wonderful. And again, Drew, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Sure. Hopefully we'll have some information y'all are not unaware of, but don't know all the details of. So there's really two main laws that we'll talk about today pertaining to county political party committees. I'm going to say county committees. I hope that's all right. That's kind of a mouthful. The first is just what is it defined as in Arkansas law, and that's set out in Arkansas Code 7, Section 7-6-2016. And then for county committees, all of the registration and reporting is generally in one statute. There's a few other laws that affect county committees, and you know, county committees used to just be one of several hundred types of contributors to political campaigns. But back in 2014, the people of the state of Arkansas amended the Constitution to restrict that list down to just a few contributors. Individual people could give, political action committees, political parties, and county committees are really the groups that are designated by law to be able to give to candidates. County committees aren't limited to giving to candidates. Obviously, there's other groups, and we'll talk about that here in the definition. So, like I said, Section 7-6-2016 defines a county committee as a group that's organized at the county level for the purpose of supporting its affiliate party and making contributions. There's little doubt that your groups exist for a lot more to support its affiliate party than just making contributions. This definition really just focuses on those, making contributions activities rather than all the other, voter drive, voter registration drives, or all sorts of charitable purposes that county committees do. But from our standpoint, what we regulate is this stuff. A county committee is recognized by an organized political party as defined in Section 7-1-101, which we'll talk about in a second, as being affiliated with that party. The group would receive contributions from one or more persons, and person could be defined broadly as an individual or a company or any sort of group. In order to make contributions to candidates, ballot question committees, legislative question committees, political parties, political action committees, PACs, or other county committees. A political party committee would not accept any contribution or cumulative contributions in excess of $5,000 from any person in a calendar year. One thing I would note about that is there was a bill late in the 2023 legislative session that amended the rules for political action committees and allowed them to take $10,000 in a calendar year. So I don't know why they left county committees at the 5,000. That would be something to ask the members of the General Assembly. But I suspect that once that gets noticed, that'll change and go to the same level as the PAC. And one of the big key factors in being recognized as a county political party committee is that the group registers with Secretary of State before making any contributions. This is a county map of Arkansas. It just signifies that there are 75 counties, so there are 75 chances to be a county committee and an affiliate group for one of the two recognized parties right now. That can change, and we'll talk about that here. You know, as I said before, a county committee is recognized by an organized political party. Well, what is an organized political party? It's set out in Arkansas Code 7110128. A political party means any group of voters that at the last preceding general election polled for a candidate for governor or nominees for presidential electors at least 3% of the entire vote cast for the office. I know that there's several other groups out there that are held out as a party, the Libertarians, the Green Party, and there's been others over the years. Reform Party, I guess, is one. But currently, under state law, it's just Democrats and Republicans. Getting some echo. Let me see if I can do something about that here.
And as Drew work on what he's working on again, for those who have just come in, I want to welcome you to this platform of learning and informative information. Again, I am Goldi Gaines, your Democratic Party of Arkansas Treasurer and Chair of Budget and Audit Committee. And it is my hope that you walk away much stronger and more informed than you were before you came on this morning. All right, go ahead, Drew.
Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully this will help. And that definition goes on to say that the Secretary of State has the power to disallow a name if they have the opinion that it will confuse or mislead the voters at an election. Hopefully that never happens, because I think that gives one person a lot of power there. If a party fails to obtain 3% of the total votes cast in an election, they cease to be a political party under this definition. I don't think your group is in any danger of that. That's happened to a few parties over the years, third parties, but I can't imagine it's ever happened. Registration and reporting by political county committees. County committees really have to, like, the first step towards compliance, if a county committee is out of compliance, is registration. We every quarter will get a call from a committee whose treasurer has moved on, or you know, just not available to kind of hand off to a new treasurer all the information they need. So they may not be registered, they may not be reporting correctly. The first step usually to fixing an issue like that is to ensure that you're either registered or to get registered with the Secretary of State. To qualify as a county committee, a county committee will register with the Secretary of State within 15 days after accepting contributions that exceed $5,000 in the aggregate. Well, there are several county committees that don't hit that in a year. But if they're going to give money to candidates, they still have to, if you think about that definition I gave you, in order to make contributions, you have to be registered. So, there we go.
And Drew, I would like to hop in really quick.
Sure.
For the Democratic county parties across Arkansas, we register no matter what. It doesn't matter if you've generated funds for the year. So I just want everyone to know that this is not about whether or not you've generated funds for the Democratic Party, it is required that you register with the Secretary of State's office. Go ahead,
I
Drew.
think that is a good policy to have because it gives you the flexibility, even if you've not been raising funds or spending funds, you can do it at any point as long as you're registered and reported. The registration has to be renewed every year by January 15th, unless the group has ceased to exist. And registration is there is a registration form. The law says it's provided by the Secretary of State. We actually generate it and provide it to them. It's available on our website as well. And the law also says it shall be verified by an affidavit of an officer of the committee. That just basically means it has to be signed and notarized by the treasurer or the chairman or another officer. But typically it's going to be the treasurer because they have to sign the registration and the reports anyway. So, like I said, they have to sign it. The committee shall appoint a treasurer who's a qualified elector of the state of Arkansas. So, basically, you have to be registered to vote and live in Arkansas to be a treasurer for a county committee. That's a pretty easy one to recognize. No contribution can be accepted by a county committee or an expenditure made that has not registered and does not have a treasurer. So those are some pretty basic requirements. On the registration, you have to provide the name, address, and if applicable, a phone number of the committee and the name, address, phone number, and place of employment for each of its officers. And if there's an acronym in your name, you would want to put that on the registration. So if the Democratic Party of Pulaski County decided to put an acronym out on their check or report under an acronym, you'd put both Democratic Party of Pulaski County and then whatever you have. You have to disclose the bank that you're using. It has to be a bank in the state. You have to provide the full name of the bank, street address, city, state, and zip code. And then a written acceptance appointment by the treasurer. And that's why earlier I said the treasurer has to sign the registration form. There's basically an affidavit stating that they accept the responsibility of being the treasurer on the registration form. On to reporting, there's really just 4 reports a year, and they're due after calendar quarters, 15 days. So we just had the second quarter report due on July 15th. So you'll have basically a report due on January 15th, April 15th, July 15th, and October 15th every year. And that's just no matter what, you have to file that. Even if you have had no activity at all, you would have to file that report once you're registered.
Drew, would you please announce those dates again, please?
Sure. And it's April 15th, well, January 15th, April 15th, July 15th, and October 15th. I will say, though, that if the 15th of any of those months falls on a holiday or a weekend, the next business day that the Secretary of State is open is the due date. So if the 15th fell on a Saturday, then the following Monday would be the due date. In the reports, you have to provide the total amount of contributions received and the total amount of contributions made during the filing period. So it'd be a 3-month period, and the cumulative amount of those totals. You have to provide the current balance of funds, and then you have to itemize contributions that exceed $200 in the aggregate from any contributor. So if you've got somebody who's giving you $200 or less, they would just go in a non-itemized section of the report, and I'll show you the report here in a minute. That is just a total of those contributions. But if somebody gives you more than $200, then it's just like a campaign. Really, you'd have to disclose the contributor's name, address, employer, place of business or occupation, the date of the contribution, the amount of the contribution, and then their total for the year. Because the total for the year gets to the, if you go back to the definition, nobody can give more than 5,000 in a calendar year. So if you've got a contributor that's, on the verge of that, it would be a signal that they need to wait till the next year to give them more money. It'd be a good problem to have, I suppose, for county committee. Here is a screenshot of the front page of the county committee quarterly reporting form, and it's got the dates on it that I just mentioned. So first quarter is April 15th, second quarter is July 15th, third quarter is October, and then the fourth quarter is January 15th, and that's also the date your registration would need renewing. You can get those forms from us at arkansasethics.com. There's an online filing system, and I think we'll talk about that here in a minute, at the Secretary of State's website. And then the previous reports you filed are also on the Secretary of State's website. So that's useful because if you look at section 4 here, the balance of funds at the beginning of the reporting period, that's going to be, you're going to look at that. That's going to be the number that you reported in section 9 in the previous report. So if you need to know where to start, say you're the new treasurer and you don't know what the balance you were working with was, you'd look at that and you're confident that the reports are correct. You would look at section 9 on the previous quarter's report, and that's your starting number. The reports do have to be filed on time. It's a violation of law to file them late. It's deemed to be timely filed if it's hand delivered or mailed to the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State really is the ultimate authority on when a report has been filed. They file mark them. Typically, they will give you credit for mailing it to them on the date that the report is due. I would, recommend not waiting until the last minute. People do it all the time, and I understand that. But if you're concerned that about the Secretary of State giving you credit for mailing it on time, you can also send a copy via fax to the Secretary of State. And we'll go back one slide. The Secretary of State's contact info is up there, including their fax number. It may be tough for some folks to find a fax these days, but that's what is laid out in the law. If you fax a report to the Secretary of State, it has to, the original has to be there within 10 days. What they'll do is they'll stamp received on a faxed one, and then when they get the original, that's when the filed one is due, and they'll give you the date for the fax on the filed one, so you get credit for that day. There's also online filing, and that's basically what this means is the Secretary of State can set up a system, and I don't know how much say we actually get in approving it, even though that's what the law says. But they have worked with us on this new one, so they switched over to a new system in fall of 2023.
Yes, and Drew, I'd like to include for the panel, we are pushing towards online registration only. As a party, we are moving away from paper unless it is absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
So for all of you, and Drew, I would also like you to know that this audience these are county parties who are already registered and properly named with the Secretary of State's office. So
Okay,
perhaps that'll also assist you in the different topics and subjects that you talk about.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Well, so you may know a lot of what I'm already saying, but the presentation is the presentation. So again, you have to itemize contributors that exceed $200, any particular contribution. So you could have somebody give over $200 on, say, July 7th, and then give you another over $200 contribution on August 15th. Well, that'd be two different itemized contributions in the same report, but then you're also going to show their aggregate amount. There's a box up to the right, or a drop down box to that as well. And then you also have to report any non-monetary items that the committee received, the county committee received. And again, you have to show the date the item was contributed or received, and then a description of it, and you'd have to assign a fair market value to the item, and that would apply to the $5,000 limit for a contributor. So if you're having an event with like an auction or something, and people are contributing items, you'd want to make sure that there wasn't a more than $5,000 item, because that'd be a contribution to the committee, and they'd be limited to that $5,000. County committees must report administrative expenses. There's not really a definition anywhere in the law of what an administrative expense is. We sort of, if it's something that's not a contribution, or some sort of, just basically, if it's not a contribution made by the committee, and it's something that exceeds $100, we tell people to report it as an administrative expense, because that's really a kind of a catch-all. But like it says, any administrative expense that's a single expenditure that exceeds $100, it has to be itemized. So you have to have the amount of the expenditure, the name and address of the payee, and the date the expenditure was made. And any of the sub $100 or $100 or less than $100 administrative expenditures are treated sort of like contributions. There's just kind of a lump sum box in the form for that. And that just says county committees can pay reasonable administrative expenses out of the contributions it's received. There's nothing, again, that really defines what that is. Reasonable is sort of a gray area. It's certainly things like postage and things that are tied to the core activities of the making contributions or receiving contributions would go into administrative expenses. If you were having a fundraiser and spent money on that, I think that's where that would be reported. Reports have to be verified by an affidavit of an officer of the committee stating to the best of their knowledge and belief the information disclosed is complete, true, and accurate. That just basically means that the county committee's officer, one of the county committee's officer, and it's usually the treasurer, is signing the report under oath and has it notarized. If let's see, one of the questions we have there, is there an accounting platform already created with formulas by the Secretary of State or the state party? I don't know about formulas. The online filing system will keep a um, it will do the math for you on balances, but it's based on previous reports. So ultimately, the accuracy is up to the treasurer. I think, I think that may be a better question for the state party if they have some sort of an accounting platform available to its members, but I don't know that I would call the Secretary of State site an accounting platform, but it's and I will also say that they sometimes have issues with it that will there are math errors. I know there's, for lack of a way to put it, better way to put it. They usually recognize those and fix those pretty quickly. It's usually some computer code issue. They're still perfecting this system, I guess. Hopefully it'll get better as time goes along. But as far the Secretary of State has the ability to make your balances go up and down based on what you're reporting, but I could not say that it's accurate. So I think that's really something that is the responsibility of the committees themselves. Contributions, no county committee, again, I've said this a million times, I'll probably say it 5 more times at least. No committee shall accept any contribution or cumulative contributions in excess from any person over 5,000 in a calendar year. So that's it's a yearly limit for county committees and PACs. Candidates are limited to $3,300 per election from any one contributor. So if your county committee has a candidate you want to give money to, you'd be limited to $3,300 for that candidate, and that could be any combination of monetary contributions or non-money contributions. My understanding is county committees and state parties often will provide postage for candidates, so you'd be limited to that. That $3,300 number is based on inflation and the consumer price index. You all probably have noticed that it has gone up from $2,700 in 2014 up to $2,900. And now we're up to $3,300. So each odd number year, we have to look at the consumer price index and apply a formula to it, and that's generally how that number gets generated. We have a rule that we put out that signals that number, and so since January of 23, the limit has been $3,300. And before I talk about what a contribution is, the limit applies for candidates for each election. So a candidate could take $3,300 for a primary election, a primary runoff, if there is one, a general election, or a general runoff. You wouldn't want to make a contribution to a candidate who's unopposed for a primary runoff or a general runoff, because it wouldn't exist. But certainly, if it looks like they're going to be in a runoff, you could make that contribution. I don't know that applies to county committees very much, because you typically wait till the general to make those kind of contributions. What is a contribution? I'm not going to read that whole list, but it's basically anything of value. It could be monetary, but it could be non-monetary. A loan is a contribution. And one thing I'll back up and say about that contribution limit for candidates is the candidate themselves are not limited by the $3,300. They can give or loan as much as they want to their own campaign. But One thing of interest to county committees in particular, by rule, the commission stated that membership dues paid to a committee are a contribution, but filing fees aren't. I've never really understood that one, but I think it is from a different set of laws a long time ago. It is currently the law. Feel free to do it, but I think it presents some math issues if you do that. If you're taking those filing fees and applying them to the same pot of money that you're going to make contributions out of.
So we heard you correctly when you said membership dues are considered contributions.
Correct. I will say this too, if you've got a separate account that is completely not commingled with money you're going to be giving to candidates or making contributions to, not just candidates, to anybody. I guess theoretically membership dues could go there if they were used for some other purpose other than making contributions. It wouldn't be a contribution at that point, but that's kind of a complicated case by case basis. If there's some need to make those payments separate from your political activity, I'll put it that way. Political activity. Call us. We can walk through the options on that, but I think in general the default should be just treat them as a contribution and report them. And I don't know what the dues are. I assume they're under $200, so they're not going to have to be itemized anyway. You'd want to look at who has made those contributions and keep a record yourself, so you know whether or not that they've made another contribution that takes them over the $200 limit. But I don't.
Dues are not a requirement.
Yeah, if you've got a person that's just paying dues, they're not going to be itemized on the reports. Contribution includes things like purchasing tickets for events, dinners, luncheons, rallies. If you know, if you're having, you know, all the parties have, you know, their big dinner every year, tickets to that. If you give it to a candidate, that's a contribution. The one thing that is not, there's kind of an exception to contribution is volunteer personal services. So if you're the treasurer of the county committee and you're also volunteering for a candidate, well, the county committee hasn't made a contribution, or that person hasn't made a contribution if they're volunteering their own personal time. And that could be, you know, professional services, or it could just be, you know, knocking on doors or stuffing envelopes or something. That would not be considered a contribution to that candidate. So it wouldn't have to be reported by the committee or by the candidate as a contribution.
And we will not have to identify that anywhere in documentation as an in-kind.
No, it's not an in-kind. The volunteer services exception is not an in-kind. And that's really more something for the candidate to watch out for, because, you know, say they've got an accountant that's providing them with services. Well, the accountant can provide free accounting to them on a volunteer basis, but if the accountant uses their office staff or their office resources to provide those services, it's no longer just the volunteer services of that accountant. They've got paid staff doing work, and then it becomes a contribution by that company, which the candidate couldn't take. So if you're talking about professional services, you'd really want to be careful about that as a candidate. In-kind contributions or just, you know, any sort of service or item provided to a candidate or a committee without charge or for a charge that's less than the fair market value of the item or service. The law also uses the term non-money contribution generally, and you'll see that on the forms. An in-kind contribution and a non-money contribution are the same thing. What constitutes a contribution? You can only take a contribution as a candidate from permissible contributors. I think she took some of this from the candidate presentation. I can't take more than $3,300, and the value must be added to a monetary contribution. So basically, I think what she means there is if you have a combination of non-money or in-kind contributions and monetary contributions, those have to be aggregated together for purposes of the contribution limit. Value of an in-kind contribution is its fair market value as if it had been purchased, sold, or leased in the ordinary course of business. Again, there's a volunteer service exception that applies to manual tasking and specialized services. I think I've said all that. A county committee can accept this moves over back into county committee territory. It applies to basically any sort of political entity. A county committee cannot accept contributions from a political action committee that is a prohibited PAC, and that's basically a PAC that is not registered with the Secretary of State. I don't know that you're ever a prohibited county committee, but a PAC that doesn't register is defined as a PAC that fails to report and register as required by law. Contributions cannot be made or accepted from individuals who are not citizens of the United States or businesses that are not United States, don't have a presence in the United States. Campaign contributions are deemed to have been accepted if the candidate or committee has accepted the contribution and has not returned it within a reasonable time. Reasonable time is not really defined in law. We typically look at it as a 5 business day period, but there could be some circumstance where it could be longer. I mean, if the committee treasurer was out of state in that 5 business day period and or out of the country or something and had no ability to check the mail, then when you get back and find a contribution that you know you can't take, you can return it within that period. It's sort of a case by case basis. If you have any question about a contribution that you think the committee may not be able to take, feel free to call us and we will be happy to talk through it. That's really true of any of these things. A contribution or expenditure rather has deemed to have been made on the date the amount is readily ascertainable by the person making the expenditure. So that kind of applies to administrative expenses or to, in your case, contributions as well. You're going to know, what the amount of the contribution you're making is on X date, but you could have some expense for a fundraiser that, you could order something and not know exactly how much it's going to be. The vendor could send you a bill. And it's not, just one thing I'll note, it's not the date that you get your credit card bill or that it shows up on a statement. It's the date that it was charged, if you're making a credit card expenditure. The one thing I'll say about this that's really applicable to county committees is you could have different dates of making a contribution than a candidate reports. We get calls about that sometimes. So, it could be that the Jefferson County Democratic Committee gives a $500 contribution to a candidate on September 1st. Well, they don't get it until September 15th. for whatever reason, and so they would report it as having been received on the 15th, while the county committee would report it on September 1st. Again, contribution is limit is $3,300. And as I said before, a county committee is one of the few groups that can make contributions. An individual, that means an individual human being. We talked about what a political party is. There's another way to define political parties involving petitions. So either of those two groups can make contributions. A county committee, a legislative caucus committee, which is basically deemed by law to be a PAC. So you'd have to be an approved PAC, which means they register and report. There are limits on the use of cash. So you can only accept a cash contribution of up to $100. And you can only make an expenditure of up to $50 in cash. And then anything else must be done by written instrument, which would include, electronic contributions or checks or credit cards, basically anything that makes a statement. One thing I'll note about that is we'll get questions about cashier's checks. Sometimes a cashier's check is not deemed to be a written instrument because it's not the contributor, it's not the contributor's record. It's basically cash once you take it from the bank. You'd have to report it as a contribution from the bank, not the contributor, I guess, if you're going to try to make it a written instrument. So anonymous contributions, a candidate can't keep an anonymous contribution of $50 or more and is required to give contributions that exceed that to the Secretary of State. I don't know of a situation where that would really apply to a county committee, but this section has a lot of things that are candidate applicable. Are there exceptions to filing a quarterly report? No. Like I said before, you're always going to have to file those quarterly reports. They are generally always going to be due on the 15th or the next business day. And if you've had no activity in a calendar quarter, there's a little box on the paper form or a drop down box that just basically says no activity. And it's, people forget to do that one a lot because there's nothing really to do other than check a couple of boxes. But one of the good things about Ms. Gaines having the policy, or the Democratic Party having the policy of getting on the online filing system, is you're basically 2 mouse clicks away, or I don't know if it's 2 exactly, but just a few mouse clicks away from filing those reports if it's a no activity report. You have to keep records of all of the contributions and expenditures for a period of 4 years. There's a look back period for that. And so you want to make sure that, and it's not just the reports, it's the supporting evidence for what's in the report. If you've got electronic records, you'd want to make sure that those were intact for that 4-year period, because the law has a 4-year statute of limitations, whether it's us enforcing it or all these laws have, in theory, could be enforced by a prosecutor as well. So you'd want to make sure you keep those records. And so that includes name, address, place of employment for both contributors to county committees and to people you made contributions to. And this is just the penalties that apply to county committees or anybody else that we have jurisdiction over. If a county committee or a person violated any of the laws under our jurisdiction, and in this case it'd be 762.26, then the commission could impose a fine of between $50 and $3,500 or issue a public letter of caution, warning, or reprimand. That's just generally applicable to candidates or lobbyists or anybody that falls under our umbrella. We'll look at the forms that you all have to file. It'll look a little different on the filing system, but it'll generate the end result will look like these forms as well. You all are probably super familiar with them already, but we're going to take a look at them. All of them are available on our website. And then the Secretary of State has the online filing system. So this is, we looked at this front page a little earlier. It's got the signature of committee officer and the affidavit or the notary block. Again, you've picked which applicable calendar quarter this is for. You put the year that you're reporting in up here. You got your balance of funds. One thing that I don't know if we have a slide on in this, but you can hold committee funds in an interest-bearing account, and you would report that interest in block 5 there. 6 is the total monetary contributions received. 7 is the contributions made to candidates, committees, or any other group that you're allowed to make contributions to. 8 is administrative expenses. All that goes into the balance of funds at the close of the reporting period. And like I said before, if you didn't have any activity, you'd basically, if you're paper filing, you put your beginning balance and your ending balance and 4 and 9, and those would be the same number, and you check no activity. This is section 11 over here is where contributions received by the county committee that exceed $200 would go. So if Joe Smith gave the Johnson County Democratic Committee $400 on August 1st, 2024, you'd put August 1st, 2024 there. Joe Smith's address, Joe Smith's employer, place of business, occupation, the $400, and if he had previously given you $200, the total for the year would be $600. This is all pretty basic. And then it continues over to this page. If you have received, monetary contributions that are under $200, you would just add all of those up and put them in this box. You would add your monetary contributions that exceed 200, the total amount of those with the total amount of non-money, and you'd get your total amount of monetary contributions received right there. And then that number is going to go, let me go back to the front page. That number is what would go into block 6 there. And then section 15 is non-monetary contributions that are received over 200. And so, as we talked about before, you would put the date that the committee received the item, the name and address of the contributor, and then a description. In my opinion, we need to find a way to make that box bigger. You can always attach stuff to the paper forms. I think there's a way to do that in the online filing system too. The fair market value of the item, and then, if Joe Smith, who had given you the $400 contribution and had a $600 cumulative total, if he gives you a $500 item there, then you've got $1,100 from Joe Smith for the cumulative total from that contributor for the year. And again, you'd itemize there and put the total there, and add that to any non-itemized items under $200 given during the reporting period, and that total goes there in 18. Section 19 is the contributions made to candidates. And you put the date, the You'd identify the candidate, address of the candidate committee. If you don't know that, it's probably going to be on one of their campaign contribution and expenditure reports. Depending on the type of candidate they are, if they're a state or district candidate, it'll be on the Secretary of State's website. If they are a county, municipal, or school board candidate, it'll be at the county clerk's office in your county. You would identify which election the contribution was made and the amount of contribution. So if the Poinsett County Democratic Committee gave $400 to Jane Smith, who's running for county treasurer on August 1st. You put August 1st, Jane Smith, whatever her address is going to be, and then it'd be for the 2024 general election, and then the amount of contribution would go. You would total up the itemized contributions that the committee made, total up the non-itemized contributions that the committee made, and then total those two numbers here in 22. And let's go back. That number will go in section 7, total contributions made to candidates committee. If the committee had non-itemized contributions to candidates or committees, that would go here. So if Jane Smith for treasurer received postage instead of money, that would be laid out here. And then again, you would, it's essentially the same as the receipt of non-itemized. You would just report the total itemized and total non-itemized, combine those and put that number there. Administrative expenses is similar, and it goes here. And again, that's sort of the catch-all. If you've got, you know, bank fees, they would go there. If you've got postage or you know, paper for the county committee office, it go there. So that sort of thing. Make sure I didn't put too far there. Sorry about that. All of this information is boiled down probably in a more organized way than I'm giving to you in the rules on political committees. It's essentially just the language in the law that is broken down a little bit, but it's pretty close to what the law says. Those are available on our website at arkansasethics.com. And then the online filing systems at sos.arkansas.gov. You all are probably pretty familiar with this already, but if you're looking for the online filing system, this is the front page of the Secretary of State's website. You click the elections tab. You can click this drop-down box. If you click on it, it'll take you to a landing page that has all these options, but you can click on ethics filings, and then you can go to the new online filing system at this link here. If you need to go back and look at old reports, I was on the phone yesterday with a county committee that had essentially lost all its records because the treasurer did not make them available when he or she left. And so they didn't know what beginning and ending balances were. They couldn't really, they had left and closed the bank account and basically left them with the cashier's check. There's some issues there, but there's information that they can get from public filings that can help them kind of recreate what they need to get back on their feet. You can look at the old filings going back to the second quarter of 2023 back to 2017. This one somewhere in here, and since this is a slide and not the website, I can't tell you exactly where. You can also look at the pre-2017 reports. I don't know how useful those are at this point, but during this period, we would tell people to go look at those archived reports. I think the link says archived reports, but really, since there's a 4-year statute of limitation, you'd want to look back to somewhere within 4 years. So to get registered on the site, there's a box over here that would direct you to going into, and again, I know you all are probably familiar with this, but you would go into the register section, and it'll generate a signature card that will be sent to you, and you have signed and notarized by each of the officers and sent back to the Secretary of State. And they'll provide login credentials at that point, which will go here. If you've got questions about what your login credentials are, the Secretary of State's office should be able to help you with that. And really, that's true of a lot of any kind of tech issue with this site. You can
Drew,
search for committees there. Yes.
did I understand you correctly when you said the Secretary of State's office should be able to give some information regarding the login credentials? Now, of course, we know that the username is already your email address. So in the case of someone not remembering their password, or for whatever reason not having that password, we found that forgot password option has not been helpful. So are you saying that we can definitely call the Secretary of State's office and
Yes.
perhaps they can give us what our password is?
I think that that would be the only group that could. We don't have that information, so they would have to, if the forgot password
Option isn't very
option
helpful.
isn't available,
Mhm.
I think that they can reset it. They are in contact with the site developers and can manipulate things, and so they should definitely be able to help with that. I don't know who else could if they can. I'll put it that way.
Okie dokie, thank you.
And that's also true if you've got a committee that somehow missed a report and was able to file a later report. It'd be tough to go back and file, say you missed the second quarter report, but somehow the system lets you file the third quarter report. It wouldn't automatically let you file a second quarter report, so the Secretary of State's office can populate a second quarter report for you. That really happens more of a candidate report, but I think the same thing would be applicable to a PAC or a county committee report. You can search for
Yes,
committees there, and
for
one of the
those who,
things
I'm sorry, Drew.
I'm
For
sorry.
those who have had issues, if you have not filed your second quarter, or if you have not filed your first quarter, you can contact the Secretary of State. They will go into the back office of your portal and they will reset whatever quarter it is that you need to file. So when you go into your portal, that option will be available for you to tap into. But again, if you do not file within the window of filing for that particular quarter, you can always call the Secretary of State's office and they'll reset that particular quarter for you. Okay, go ahead, Drew. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Um, one of the things that I didn't even realize it was on the Secretary of State site, but there is a reminder notice for reports and registration that you may want to sign up for. If you go to this link or just go to the front page at arkansasethics.com, there's an email reminder notice. We used to send out postcards for reminders to basically anybody who has to file something. Due to budget cuts, we had to scale that back to an email reminder. And so you got to go sign up for it if you want the emails, and hopefully some of you have already done that, but go to our website, sign up for those emails, and you'll get a reminder notice ahead of the due date for the quarterly report or the registration renewal, that you've got to do that. I certainly would probably need that if I was in treasurer's shoes for some of these things, because these quarterly reports and monthly reports for candidates and lobbyists kind of sneak up on us sometimes. Again, we talked about the reports, and there's the archive, the link that I was talking about earlier. It's down there. It's just underneath the link to the current portal, which is right there. And I don't know if you can tell, my colleague Jill Barham put this presentation together, so she should get credit for all this. But
yes,
and I think she may have spoken to some of your groups earlier, but some of this is I'm seeing for the first time. I'm familiar with all the information, but forgive me if I'm surprised by something. So this is a disclosure that applies to candidates, really. It's but if you're helping candidates, if you're making signs for a candidate, or purchasing signs for a candidate, this is certainly applicable. Arkansas Code Annotated 76228C requires candidates to include a paid-for disclaimer on printed campaign material, and that includes yard signs, push cards, basically anything flat, except for stickers. Political paraphernalia like t-shirts, stickers, buttons, pins, nail files don't have to have it, but most campaign material does. So if you're providing a non-money contribution of signs to a candidate, you would want to put paid for by your county committee, or just make a monetary contribution to that candidate so they can purchase the signs. They would put paid for by their campaigner.
Okay, Drew, did I understand you correctly? If a county party does signs or fans or any kind of paper good for a candidate, it is for that county to put or make sure that that mark is on there, paid for by Democratic County
The
Party
candidate is
of.
actually liable for any signs that they have. If a county committee provides signs, the
Right.
candidate would need to ensure that. So you wouldn't want to provide signs to somebody and get them in trouble. So you would want to put paid for by there.
Yeah.
And it could certainly say paid for by the committee if
Okay.
they were the ones paying for the signs.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to make clear for everyone to really understand, that if you're offering these items to a candidate, you can make sure that that mark is there, that trademark paid for by the committee. But of course, like you said, Drew, if you choose not to do signs or produce actual items for that candidate, then it will be up to the candidate to make sure
Well, and even if you do
it's paid for by the campaign, right?
provide them with signs, and so if the candidate accepted signs from a county committee that didn't put it on there, the candidate would need to put something on there to show that. I mean, it's just the way the law reads is the candidate is responsible for it. One new thing about this law, it's been in effect since 2017. It was changed in the last legislation to say that if you have a two-sided sign, the paid for by disclaimer has to be on both sides of the sign, and that's really most yard signs. You have to put it on both sides. This is a list of all the reporting calendars. In addition to the reminder notice program, there's a calendar applicable to county political party committees. I don't know when she did the screenshot up, but there's a 2024 calendar applicable to county committees, and it's just got those quarterly reporting dates that are applicable. But if you've got candidates that you're interested in, there's a calendar for each of the candidates out there, or, you know, PACs, basically anybody who has to file reports, we produce a calendar for. And those are, again, at our website. If you, this is just, I guess, stuff that you may get asked because you've got public servants that are involved in your committees, but there's, you know, all kinds of ballot issue stuff going on right now. I think the petition stuff is generally over with unless you're talking about a local petition. Public servants are not supposed to circulate initiative or referendum petitions or solicit signatures on an initiative referendum in any public office or during usual office hours or while on duty. I actually just wrote, and the commission adopted an advisory opinion for a city on this last week. So feel free to take a look at that if you're that interested in that. I think this one was taken from the candidate one because it says after you win. It includes just basically a bunch of rules that would apply to candidates, but, you know, generally good information for anybody. Rules on conflicts. There's all kinds of conflicts of interest that are laid out there. Rules on gifts. Public servants are limited in the type of gifts they can accept, including from lobbyists. There's a whole separate set of rules on gifts from lobbyists. Basically, these are some helpful resources. Always go to our website. Feel free to call us. The Running for Public Office handbook is at the Secretary of State site. It is helpful for committees and PACs and everybody else too, because it gives you the ground rules for campaigns. There's a judicial election guide if you've got people running for judge. I think the most pertinent thing for a county committee would be just, you know, judicial races are supposed to be nonpartisan. I think you're probably seeing some that aren't, but it kind of lays out whether or not a judicial candidate could take a contribution from your committee in there. We don't really enforce that. That's enforced by the Judicial Disability and Judicial Discipline and Disability Commission, JDDC, but that may be applicable to, you know, if you have a committee that has a judge you like, they're not a Democrat, but they believe what you believe, and you may wish to give them money. Well, I would look at that or call JDDC. This publication provides guidance on certain aspects of Arkansas law. It's basically saying the law is what controls, not anything I've said here, but hopefully I've not said anything contrary to the law. I don't think I did. And this is just basically a list of all the laws under our jurisdiction. And, you know, we've talked about things that are in 76201 at SEC today. But those are all the different things that we have oversight over. And I know I've thrown a lot of slides with a lot of information at you. I'm sure that we can make this available, the slides available to you if you need that. And this is just contact information. We've got 4 attorneys on staff. Any one of us should be able to answer county committee questions. So, you know, basically call that number and tell the receptionist what your question is, and she'll direct you to one of us. Our director is also an attorney, and he's been here for 20 plus years and really knows pretty much everything about campaign finance in Arkansas. So he's available as well. Secretary of State's office, if you do have that login issue, this is the number to call, or any issue with the online filing system, or questions about due dates, or, I mean, you know, have they received something? 501-682-5070. anybody at that number should be able to help you. Sometimes if it's something they're not sure about, they'll direct you back over to us. And on one hand, that can be frustrating for everybody involved, but if they get asked a question they think is something that falls under a legal purview, or if it's not a black and white, just here's the button you click in our system, they'll often send you to us. But there's a woman named Shikari and another woman named Chantel that often answer the phones. They have, and don't, that may change day to day. They have a lot of different people that work over there and do different things, but those are sort of the folks that I hear from the most, interacting with the public day to day. So and both of those ladies really know the online filing system very well, and can help you with tech issues. And if they can't help you, they can escalate it to their superiors and to the site developers if need be. And sometimes there are computer issues with this online filing system that are completely out of anybody's control until somebody goes in and fixes it via code. So that has happened. One time I can tell you that happened was during the 2022 governor's election. Chris Jones had a bad issue, and this was on the old system where it was reporting balances that were way out of whack with what they were trying to report. They had no control over that. They were putting accurate numbers in, and the computer system was not fixing it. And that was something that the Secretary of State was ultimately able to solve, but it was really just a technical problem, and that's the sort of thing that they can take care of. And these are just some guidelines. When in doubt, take the cautious route. Their standards of conduct, and this is probably the biggest one. When it comes to ethics, it's better to seek guidance than forgiveness. We get questions a lot about how to cure something that can't really be cured. Sometimes you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. But if you're in a situation like that, we can find ways to mitigate the damage. But sometimes once somebody's violated the law, it can't be undone. So, but there are ways to essentially lay that out there so people know what happened. But before you take an action, if you have questions about it, please call us. We will be happy to walk you through what the law is on any given situation, which is what this slide says. So I will stop there and be happy to try to answer any questions you all may have. Looks like it went a little over an hour, a lot over an hour, so I apologize for that.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask all of the participants to unmute your phone, unmute your computers or phones or whatever devices you're viewing from. And if there are any questions, please move forward in your questioning. I'm also asking that each participant shares at least one thing that they learned this morning from this presentation. Drew, I want to thank you for your time, your talent, and your treasures this morning with the information that you've shared with us. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor. I would like to share the first thing or one of the things that I learned this morning, or not so much of learned, but definitely got more clarification on, and that was the cash contribution. Cash contributions of $100 and expenditures $50. Anything beyond that must be via check, money order, or electronic transaction. So that was something that I gained more clarity on this morning. Would anybody like to share at least one thing that they've learned this morning? I see you over there, Mike.
You talking to me, Goldi?
I am all day long, just as sure as
Well,
the sun is
here, so first of all, let me apologize to you both for jumping on the call late today, but I had a client that I didn't rearrange my schedule with this morning. But I found the information, what I heard today, very beneficial, and looking forward to making sure that here in Crittenden County, we abide by all the rules, and I thought it was very clear. And also, it was great to hear that if we have a question, we can pick up the phone and call Secretary of State's office and help us walk through any problems that we might have. And sometimes those do happen when everything's completely volunteer run in these county parties.
Yeah, if
okay.
there's anything you take away from this, if you have a question about, whether something's legal or not, or how to report something, call the Ethics Commission. We'll be happy to help you. And if it's a tech question, the Secretary of State will be happy to
Thank you, Drew.
try to fix it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Drew. And another question. I know that we touched on filing timely reports.
Mhm.
Was there a monetary penalty or other than us just filing late? I recall you saying something, but I'm not sure. Was there a monetary penalty attached to that?
It's not an automatic penalty, but you would be subject to a penalty if somebody were to file a complaint, or if we also do review exercises where we have staff that looks to see who filed on time, who didn't file. If a committee failed to file and we sent you a letter telling you to file, we'll typically tell you to file within 10 days. And if a committee failed to file within 10 days, we would bring an ethics complaint against that committee. And at that point, a committee would be liable for a fine between $50 and $3,500 and a public letter of caution warning. It's not going to be probably for, if somebody filed, 2 weeks late, it's probably not going to be a $3,500 fine, frankly, but it'll be something. It'll be $100 minimum typically for a late filing. But it's not automatic. It's somebody either has to file a complaint or you have to ignore us enough to make us file one. So.
Drew, I do have a question. If we are opening a county headquarters, is there any particular filings or anything that we need to be aware of that could be an ethics violation with the commission in those headquarters that we need to be?
No, sir, other than just, reporting expenditures that are connected to that. That would be an administrative expense, I would think. A lot of it would be. Where that gets difficult is sometimes there's, non-county committee, or there's county committee activities that aren't really reportable in here. In theory, a county committee could have two separate accounts, like an operating account for things like that, and sort of for lack of a better way to put it, a PAC type account for just making contributions and accepting contributions for that purpose. That one thing you might want to do if you're being gifted a space for that, or if somebody's contributing a space, that is recognize that $5,000 limit to the committee. And so that might be a good reason to have a separate account just for payment of rent or things like that, or something like that. Or, have a different purpose from just making contributions.
So if we're going to use the space, for example, to host fundraisers for different candidates out there, no reporting on our behalf, just reporting on the candidates' behalf on what they raised that night. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. If they're, I guess it typically, if it was, if you were an individual doing that with a building, it would be a non-money contribution to that candidate. I don't think that it, the county committee's headquarters would be considered a rentable space to somebody else if y'all don't rent it out to
Right.
another entity ever. I think that's just a place to have it that is not really reportable on their part. They do have to report contributions received, and if the county committee's supplying catering or something, that might be a non-money contribution to, or would be a non-money contribution to the candidate. But I don't think the space would necessarily be that.
So the space we don't have to report, but if we are furnishing, as you just said, catering, those kinds of things, then we would report that under
Yes,
our party. Okay, gotcha.
yeah, that would be non-money contribution, and that would go against their $3,300 limit. You could have, if you had a group of candidates, you could prorate it though. So if you had, a slate of county candidates for one fundraiser in your space and you were supplying catering, you could prorate it between say you had 5 candidates and you split it into fifths.
And then if we get that catering donated locally and it's not an expense of the party, then how do we report that?
You would report that as receiving a non-monetary contribution to the committee. And then because the committee can accept a business's non-money contribution, the candidate could not.
Okay.
So if you're, if you got a restaurant supplying catering and they just give it to the committee, you would want to report that as a non-money contribution, and then the candidate would report that as a non-money contribution from the committee. You probably wouldn't want to involve them in the arranging of catering their campaign. You probably just want to handle that with non-candidate committee staff. I hope that makes sense, but
It does.
You kind of want to put a barrier between the candidate accepting a non-money contribution from an impermissible contributor, which is the restaurant.
Wonderful. Thank you. No, it's very helpful. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else with any questions or who would like to share at least one thing they learned this morning from this presentation? Okay, well, at this time, Drew, again, we want to thank you for joining us this morning and sharing very valuable information regarding county parties and the Ethics Commission rules and regulations.
You're quite welcome. And again, if you all have any questions, feel free to call us. We're open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And to the treasurers and leaders of our county parties, have a wonderful day. Let us continue to press forward. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns regarding your filing, you are always welcome to contact me at treasurer1@artdems.org, or you can pick up the phone and call me. All right. Well, I want you all to have a wonderful day and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.